I'm Melissa Shanahan, and this is the Velocity Work Podcast, episode number 76. This podcast is for attorneys who are running their own firms. We explore tactics, tools, and stories related to pushing past simply lawyering well and into building a successful firm. Working in your firm and working on your business are two very different things. This podcast focuses on the latter. Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode. This week, I have a special guest, Moshe Amsel. Moshe is a colleague that I've had the pleasure of talking with several times in the past, but this is his first time on my podcast. He's the host of Profit with Law podcast. He also is the founder and creator of the Law Firm Growth Summit, which I'm speaking at in February. I'm very excited to do that. He has this awesome background with IT as an executive and also in sales and marketing and accounting. He actually owns an accounting practice called Dream Builder Financial. And he focuses on helping clients with business advisory, tax strategy services. And his real focus in terms of everything he does right now is to help law firm owners grow their practice, creating generational wealth. And that's really important to him because of his background and where he comes from and his family. He was the recipient of generational wealth, and that had such a positive impact on his life that he recognized, and he wanted to bring that. He wants that to be the case for law firm owners. So pretty cool stuff he's up to. He has 5 kids. He's married. He's busy. So he's focused on family and growing his business and helping law firm owners. So really cool guy to have a conversation with. And today on the podcast, he brings this conversation him and I sort of had behind the scenes, and we brought it to life on this podcast, how to determine your ROI on an idea that you have. And so you hear us go back and forth, and it's so cool to meet someone who has such a different approach and is so awesome. I think that's what I love about meeting colleagues in my space. Many of us have the same values for our clients and how we operate, but we have different approaches in getting there because of our backgrounds and skills and knowledge and experience. And so it's super fun to go tete-a-tete with someone who it's just fun to hash all that out. So you're going to be listening in on that. I would highly recommend that you go to his Law Firm Growth Summit. There's no reason not to. The price is super affordable and reasonable, and he has these cool perks that is the first time I've seen them. So for instance, there's a short little synopsis that he's going to do for every single workshop that's presented. And I think there's over 30 workshops that can be attended, and you can't attend all of those, right? So if you want to, he has this short little Cliff Notes summary that he's going to do of each one, and just a way to make it digestible for law firm owners to not just be overwhelmed with information, but walk away and be able to implement right away. And I think he's doing a really good job with it. So I highly recommend you go. The experts that are in the room there are really, I'm looking forward to hearing from all of these people that he's got coming. His keynote speakers are ridiculous. I don't know if I'm allowed to say who they are. Probably we can. I haven't looked at his site to see if he's given that out. But you should go to lawfirmgrowthsummit.com/velocitywork. You should do that. You should go to that URL because he we're pairing up to do a training after the summit is over that is going to be a training for law firm owners on tax strategy, how to set things up for yourself. So next year, when it's tax prep time, you can feel really great about the strategy that you've carried through in 2021 and take those skills with you for beyond. So that's going to be a really cool workshop. I'm very excited to do that with him. I think that's going to be very, very valuable for law firm owners. So go to lawfirmgrowthsummit.com/velocitywork. And if you sign up for the conference using that URL, you will automatically have a seat at the workshop that we're doing together for tax strategy and tax planning. It's going to be great. But my whole point was when you go to that URL, you're going to see what's there in terms of the speakers that he has lined up and those that he's announced. You will be blown away by the keynote speakers. So that's all I'm saying. Also, side note, he's a profit first professional, like a certified profit first professional. So I love that he brings that knowledge because it's such a beautiful way to structure things for yourself if you own your own business. And I love the expertise that he can bring to that conversation because there's all these objections people have, and it's just barriers and excuses and justifications that people, and I can put myself in that category. At one point, I had some of the similar objections and reasons why I wasn't doing it. Once you get over those and just do it, it changes everything. It changes everything. So pretty cool that he is certified in Profit First. Okay, everyone. Well, without further ado, let's dig right in with Moshe Amsel. Okay, Moshe Amsel. I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for being with me.
Melissa, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I have been talking to you more lately because I'm very pumped to be a part of the Law Firm Growth Summit, which you are the mastermind behind. And that's coming up in February. And the more I talk to you, we start talking about different topics. And I'm like, oh yeah, that'd be amazing. Will you talk to my people about that? Will you talk to my people about that? And one of the things that that was mentioned was how to determine your ROI on an idea that you have. And so I thought, okay, let's just save the whole conversation for this podcast episode because I think law firm owners struggle with how to decide what to do. They have a lot of ideas in their head and they're not really sure what they should do first. A lot of times they don't make any headway because it's overwhelming and these things sit on the shelf for a while. And if they thought through this, they would probably take action much sooner. So that's the first reason. I'm not letting you talk yet, but one more thing. And the other thing that I wanted to say was that I have had conversations lately with my community and a little bit on the podcast about how to make decisions, how to make good decisions, and how to think about your decisions. Go all in, have your own back, and do it. Don't make a decision and dip your toe and see if it works and, oh, it's not working. And like, that's not a good way to get ROI on something. Of course, you're not going to get a return on your investment of time and resources if you're not going all in on something. And they do that because of fear and they're not sure about the ROI and all of that. So this feels like such a perfect conversation to have right now for my audience, because I think this will just help. It's sort of a next layer, a next way to think about things. So I don't even know where you want to start, but with the topic of how to determine your ROI on an idea that you have or something that you're thinking about implementing, what do you have to say on it? Like, where's your brain go first?
Awesome. I love that. And I love the topic. And you know, when we spoke and the idea came up, I said, that would be a great topic and let's run with it. But the first thing is for those who don't know who I am, I just want to take a moment and just introduce myself. Well,
and I'll do an intro, an official intro before
I'm sure you will. But I just want to say that I'm an entrepreneur, just like the people who are listening to this. And law firm owners don't necessarily think of themselves as entrepreneurs, but you're an entrepreneur when you wake up in the morning, you go through your day and you go to sleep at night and you've had at least 10 ideas of something that you should do, or that would be really good, or it's going to make you $1 million. And we have this tendency to think that we need to do all the things. And that's why I love this conversation, because we need a tool set that helps us identify what are those things and to figure out what they are. And I love something that you said, and that is that we tend to waffle on, you didn't use this word, but we tend to waffle on our idea. We tend to question whether it's going to work. And often we don't even take the action to start it because we're afraid it's not going to work. And like my coach, James Wedmore, says, the only way to ensure your failure is to not start. And that's going to guarantee that it won't work. And I love that concept, and I love that idea, because if you and I could do one thing with our clients, and that is to get them to take action and to and to stand by it and keep it to the end, they'd all be successful. And I think that's, even the Law Firm Growth Summit, right? It started as an idea, and we ran it in 2019. We had over 2,300 law firm owners there. I never would have imagined, although I told my sponsors that my goal was 10,000 people, I never would have imagined that I could get 2,300 law firm owners in a room and pull this thing off. Mm. But I went from idea to, okay, I think this can work, to validating the model, which we can talk about, and then figuring out, how am I going to make money with it? Mm-hmm. And until I was able to check all those boxes, I didn't start working on it. But once I started working on it, I didn't let up until I was done. And I think that that's really, when we look at this conversation, it's, ROI is one piece of it. And that's why, I'm a numbers guy. My background is accounting. So for me, that's the natural place for me to speak. But there's boxes to check before and after the ROI. So I think it's important to talk about those and get them out of the way so we can have the numbers conversation.
Yeah.
So what does somebody do? And I'm going to turn the tables back on you, because I'm also a podcast host. So I'm going to interview you, Melissa.
Yeah. Okay.
What does somebody do when they have an idea initially? Like, how should they compartmentalize it? What should they do with that idea in order to figure out whether it's even worth looking at?
Well, for sure, the numbers, like, really bake it out. Like, this is what's happening in my mind. Well, okay, first of all, back up. I think I would think in more of a reverse engineering way. If you have a goal, whatever that goal is, revenue goal is an easy thing to pick, right? If you have a goal and you decide on that, part of the process of getting there is deciding and planning what are the priorities, what are the things that you're going to do, what are the levers you're going to pull in order to be on track for that goal. There's going to be new things that have to be done, projects, whatever, right? Initiatives. So when you think through, it's almost like, these are the things I'm saying that they're going to have to be done, or else I'm going to be held back from my goal. And from there, then working backwards to breaking the project down and making sure it's manageable and going ahead. But it's sort of it's aligned with the larger goal that you're working towards, short term, not just long term, but actually in the year. So that's where my head goes. What do you have to say about it?
So where your head went was to this place of, I already know I'm doing this. How do I make it fit into my model? Right. But there's steps before that, right? How do we filter the good ideas from the bad ideas? Like, how do we decide which is the idea that I'm going to go all in on? You can't go in on all the ideas, because you'll never get anything done. And like you said, you don't want to do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. You want to choose something and then do that fully, commit to it. And if you commit to it, there isn't room for the other ideas. So where do you start that filtering process, and how does that begin?
Okay, wait. This brings up a good question, a clarification, because the ones that I was talking about really would fall under the category of, there's a smaller percentage of the time that you're going to bring in some new harebrained idea. The things I think that I was referencing, which now I'm seeing this conversation should not be addressing those, is the stuff that you have to get done. If you don't do these things, you are going to be held back from the goal. So that's things like, they're big, like implementing a new system or a process that if you don't do that, of course, you're going to hold yourself back from the larger goal. So something like that, or hiring someone. that if you don't do that, you're not gonna be able to hit your goal. But I think that this is an important distinction. You are, tell me where I'm wrong, but it seems like you are talking about the things that are new ideas that maybe you don't have to do, but you're trying, like, it sounds appealing. There's something that you want to implement. You're not sure where it fits into like the revenue goal, for instance, but it's like, you don't want to, it doesn't feel right to just put it on the shelf for someday and never. So that you're kind of talking about the new things, that it's not the stuff that has to be done. It's not the inevitable have to do in order to grow. It's more of the things that these are me as an entrepreneur. These are my creative. This is the creative stuff that's coming out that I'm trying to decide, is it worth it? Is that fair to say?
Yes and no. Okay. I see where you're going with this, but I would challenge you to the fact that all of our ideas could fit within our big goal, right?
It could.
A law firm owner might be taking a shower and thinking that, oh, I'm not really getting where I want to go with my law firm, so I'm going to go buy a piece of real estate. That might be true, and that might definitely be there in the mix, but that's not what I'm referring to. And we could even say I'm not referring to introducing a new practice area, which is something that, I mean, your listeners are going to be shaking their head when I say this, right?
Yep.
That's if I go to pick any random attorney and go to their website, they could be a solo attorney and they've got 5 practice areas listed. And that is a pet peeve of mine. Like, choose one of those practice areas and take the other ones off your website. You want to be successful, hone in on one thing and just get really, really good at it and get known for that. And I understand that there are geographic areas that have a small market. Even in some of the smallest geographic areas, you can be very successful with just one practice area. Now, if you're a 20 attorney firm and you've got 3 attorneys in this area and 4 in this area, different story. That's not what I'm talking about. But that's a plague, and those come from those ideas. Oh, somebody called me yesterday about doing an estate plan. I've never done an estate plan. Maybe I should do estate planning. That sounds like a good idea. So that's one area that we can go. But I'm even referring to, okay, I'm clear that I'm an estate planning attorney, or I'm clear that I'm a family law attorney. I'm also clear that I want to bring home $150,000 a year. So therefore, I'm also clear that I need to have a $300,000 in revenue. What I'm unclear about is, how am I going to land the 30 clients it takes to bring in that 30,000, that 300,000 in revenue.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. And I'm super curious to hear what you have to say about this, because
then we go to our ideas. Well, how about I do some Facebook Lives? How about I do LinkedIn outreach? How about I do an email newsletter? How about I do a blog post? How about I do SEO? How about let me see, Google PPC? And referrals. I got to have a referral system. All of a sudden, we have marketing ideas, and every day there's a new idea.
Right.
Just choose one thing, like marketing. Okay. Or in your example, should I introduce this process? Should I hire this person? Those ideas are all in the big picture, trying to move the needle to get me to where I want to be. But we don't have a way to filter through those and figure out which is the thing that I should be focusing on right now. And it's almost like we started with ideas and now we're moving back to the planning, right? Which is your area of expertise. And in the plan, we have to learn how to prioritize. We have to figure out which is the big domino that we need to push. I don't know if you read the book, The One Thing or Essentialism. They're very similar in topics, but essentially there's always a big domino that if we knock it down, it'll start the process knocking down a bunch of other dominoes in what we need to get done, and maybe even eliminate the need to do some of those other things. So what I like to think about or do when it comes to ideas is, the first thing is put the brakes on it. Before we even start to analyze numbers and is this thing going to work and how does it compare to other things, keep a place where your ideas go. I use Evernote. I told you this. I think I told you this story when I was talking to you. So Jamie Tardy, who's now Jamie, forget her last name now, podcast host of The Eventual Millionaire. Really, really smart. A great podcast if you want to tune into to a new one. But after Melissa's and mine, you don't have time for another one. So, but the eventual millionaire, I was having an offline conversation with her. I met her in Texas. I went to an event, and then we had like a social hour in a bar, and she came, and I met her, and we had a nice long conversation. And then after that, we were conversing on LinkedIn back and forth. And in that conversation, she told me, she said that when she signs on a new client, that's she's a coaching client that she's going to help coach them, to be a $1 million business owner or more. She gets them a gift, and it's like a $7 item she buys on Amazon, and it's a waterproof writing board that they can hang in the shower, because that's where ideas come. And so funny. Before you lose the idea, you forget that you had it, or that it weighs on your mind all day because you knew you had this idea and you can't remember what it was. You can write it down, because ideas come to us when we're not thinking about other things. And those places are the shower, laying in bed, going to sleep, those kinds of things. So you always want to make sure that you're in a position to be able to write them down. But there's power in writing it down and forgetting about it for a while. And that's, I think, the first step. Like, even before we have the ROI conversation, is this idea the kind of thing that excites you to the point that it keeps coming back? If it keeps coming back to you, like you put it aside, you wrote it down somewhere, and a week later you're still excited about that idea, now you should investigate it further. Because usually what happens is we're coming up with an idea because we're trying to solve a problem, and the idea itself doesn't necessarily jive with us. It's not something that we're going to enjoy doing. And most of the things that we start doing are like that. It's kind of like go on a date with somebody the first time and then marry them. Right?
Yeah.
That would be crazy. You gotta let it simmer. And you got to see if you still like them, if you're still, enthralled by them. As a matter of fact, that I would argue that maybe you should date for a couple of years before you tie the knot, because you really want to make sure that you really still love hanging out with this person after the initial allure of the relationship wears off. So that excitement with ideas, it's there, right? You got to let it simmer and then see, am I still excited about this?
I really love this. And here's why. I was just having a conversation with a client that they were joking that they give their team idea whiplash. And, they come with these ideas. And while they are right that their team can really get something to 80% or create a draft or the first iteration, and then they can tweak it from there as the owner. But I wonder what percentage of those ideas actually are something that last and are sustainable within the business, that made a lot of sense to put a bunch of resources behind, even if it's just your team's resources, it's still resources. And so this idea of, idea whiplash is what he called it. But, when you dump these ideas on, whether it's yourself, because it's just you, or your team, and it creates this pressure, this stress, like, oh, well, we need to get this. This was their new idea. We should get this together. And a lot of the times I'm even thinking of myself with my team. Like I could wait longer before I share, hey, this is what I'm thinking, because that way it doesn't feel like you're vomiting on them with ideas all the time. You're really being strategic and letting things simmer, as you say. I like that. That's great.
How do you think that your team feels when they just put all their effort into something, which then you turn around and say, that didn't work. We're going to move on to something else. Totally. How many times do they have to go all in on something for you before they start to say, you're the boy who cried wolf?
Right. Exactly.
And then they start to discount your ideas, and they not going all in. And now you're setting yourself up for failure, because the good idea is going to get lost in the bads.
Right. Yes. 100%. The firm that I used to work at, the consulting firm, the CEO is like this. I mean, it was like, this sounds dramatic, but I'm telling you, this is what it felt like. It felt like you were being thrown around the company, thrown around the room, where it's, and so often, at least 50% of the time, it didn't come to light, but you spent resources in design, in fulfillment, in brain power, like of the knowledge workers. It was like, there's so much that was wasted because there wasn't a discipline around the ideas that were shared, and they weren't really thought through. That was expected for us to do. And that was, very frustrating. It was described to us like, well, this is an environment a lot like a startup. I'm like, bullshit. That is not what this is. That is not what this is. This is chaos.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. It's startups like hustle and are agile. That doesn't mean they're a hot mess. So anyway, yeah,
exactly.
I love this.
So this is step one, right? You have to have a filtration system, and it doesn't matter what your filter is. Like, it doesn't need to be this, but you need to have a way to process an idea from when it's an idea to, am I actually going to take action on this?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you get from the place of, I have an idea, to not only am I taking action on this, but I have decided that this is the core focus of my business for the next quarter.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that is where you need to go I need to not only go on a first date, but I need to go on a second date and a third date, and I need to have a first kiss, and I need to, and then we need to move in together, and finally we can tie the knot, right? That's how you need to approach your ideas. And the first step is some sort of filtration process. So once I've filtered out the excitement and I've gotten to the point where, okay, this idea is still with me, I still think this is a good idea, then I go to what I call the back of the napkin math.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that ROI conversation that you want to have, which is, let me put some big basic numbers on this to figure out if this idea has legs that it can run with.
Yeah.
And if those numbers work and seem exciting to me, then I can figure out, okay, what is the actual strategy or the action plan of implementing this? And how do I map this out strategically so that I can knock it out in this given period of time? So I think that the ROI conversation is kind of like one of the steps, maybe second or third step in this idea filtration process. It's not actually to measure the results at the end, which you certainly can go and do and compare it to what you thought initially, but it's really part of the filter. It's part of deciding, am I going to proceed with this or not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So back of the napkin math.
Mm-hmm.
So in my head, like, I guess when I'm starting to flesh out something, that is part of the numbers are a consideration. And so I'll sit down and I'll write out what kind of resources I think it's going to take, the amount of time I think it's going to take, in terms of like, maybe this will take 2 months to actually create, and I also think about how much time I think I'm going to have to spend on it. My team's going to have to spend on it. And then on the flip side, I think what's the possibility here with my, like, what I'm going to make on this,
right?
and think that through too. So is that kind of what you mean, or do you have a different, more specific way?
Yes and no. So
okay.
You already got way more detailed than I want to get in the back of the napkin math. Let me tell you why I call it back of the napkin math, and then it'll start to make sense to you. Okay. I'm in the bar and I'm drinking with a buddy.
Yeah.
And he turns to me and he says, "Hey, I've got an idea. Let's start a restaurant." Right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just picking some random example. Let's start a restaurant,
totally.
Right? And I say, "Oh yeah, that's a great idea, right? What are we gonna sell in our restaurant? Oh, it should be a burger joint. We're gonna have the best burgers in town." Okay, great. Hang on a second. Bartender, can I get a napkin? Okay. Oh, can I also get a pen? Right. Now, on this napkin, I need to build out a business plan. What's going on that napkin? All right. If we have a restaurant, we need to have a place for it, right? What's that going to cost us? I don't know. Let's say $30,000 a year. We'll probably need to have a staff of, I don't know, let's say 4 or 5 people, and they're costing us $30,000 a year each. So that's $150,000. We're going to have to buy material. What's that going to cost? Well, it depends how many burgers we're selling. Okay. Let's pause there and let's figure out how many burgers we're selling. Well, if we think that we can get 200 diners in a night, and the average ticket per diner is $15, then we're going to generate X amount per night, multiply that times the number of nights a year that we're going to be in business. Let's write that on the napkin. That's our revenue. And for the sake of this recording, we should really do that math. But that's, so basically, I'm going to pull out a calculator right now. So what did I say? 200 diners times 15. And let's say we're open 200 days a year, maybe more. Let's say 350 days a year, because we're open every day except for major holidays, maybe. So that's $3,000 a day times, and then my math on employees was wrong because we're going to have to pay more for more people if we're open every single day. But let's just use these numbers. So we're making $1 million in revenue. And then, so we put that as our top line revenue. But now we also know that we're selling 200 hamburgers times 350 days, right? We're selling 70,000 hamburgers. So if I figure that a patty costs me 50 cents, a bun costs me 20 cents, about, the trimmings with it costs another, maybe it costs me $1 to produce the burger. So that's $70,000 in expenses of the material. So this is not a business plan, because we have to research these numbers. We have to see what they are. We have to, what is our marketing going to cost? But I take the top line number, $1 million. I put my core basic expenses. I have $150,000 for employees. I have, what number we used for rent. I don't know. So let's say it's another $100,000 for rent. And then I've got 70,000. We figured, well, let's make it 100,000 in supplies. So now I've got $1 million minus $350,000 expenses, leaves $650,000 for us minus whatever other expenses we have. We can see that there's a possibility that we can earn $250,000 each on this restaurant. Well, that's interesting. Now, do we take the conversation further? It depends. If I'm making $500,000 with the other thing I'm doing, then maybe I don't want to be busy with a restaurant. But if I'm making $20,000 in my day job, and me and my buddy came up with this idea to earn $250,000, then I say, well, this is interesting. We should take this to the next conversation. That's the back of the napkin math. Back of the napkin math is taking the most important numbers and seeing if the basic math works. If we had done the back of the napkin math and we said, we can only get 20 diners a night, and then we run these numbers, and now we calculate on this back of the napkin without adding any of the additional expenses that we're running at a loss, that's the end of the idea. Nothing further to talk about.
So there is an element of the back of the napkin math that has inevitable hope, because then you have to figure out, like, let's just say 200 was the number that you could get. Then you have to figure out, like, can we do that? Is that number like? Oh,
absolutely. No. The point of the back of the napkin math is within the realm of reality of where I think I'm going to be. What would that estimation be? And then, okay, now we got to figure out how we're going to do that. Now we have to create a business plan where we are going to get involved in all the details, right?
Yeah.
But this is for an overall business, but ideas are often a segment of the business, right? Ideas are, I've got this idea for marketing. So I only give you this example to kind of portray how you approach the back of the napkin math. It's kind of like a checkpoint to say, is there enough here in that hope that this idea is worth investigating further? It's not necessarily, let me figure out exactly what this is going to cost. That's further on. You're already taking action when you're doing that at that point. This is in the filtration phase. How do I decide, is this something worth pursuing? And not everything has easy numbers to put to it, depending on what you're talking about, right? So let's use some of your examples from earlier and some of mine, okay? So let's say that I wake up in the morning and I have this fabulous idea. And I say, oh my gosh, I don't know why I never thought of this, but I should be doing Facebook ads for my law firm to bring in clients. Well, okay. After you sat on it for a week or two, and you're still excited about that prospect. I don't know why you would be, but if you're still excited about that prospect,
right? Totally.
Then we go to the back of the napkin math conversation. And there's no right or wrong way to approach this. It's whichever makes sense to you methodically. Okay. So for me, what makes sense to me is to say, okay, let me figure out, based on my limited knowledge of Facebook advertising, what it would take to bring in leads and clients into my law firm. So let's just say that I spent $1,000 a month on Facebook ads. And I know that the average CPM means that or forget CPM. I know from talking to friends that they're converting leads at $20 a lead, right? Mm-hmm. Just use that number. Mm-hmm. It could be completely off. The whole point of this is just to do a checkpoint, right? So, and by the way, it costs me way more than $20 a lead for you lawyers.
Oh my gosh. I'm glad you just said that, because I cannot get it down. I'm just like, this is just an expensive audience. That's hilarious. That's so funny.
It is an expensive audience. So that's why we do things like this, like the podcast, right? I mean, that's not the only reason. I love talking behind the microphone. I think you do too.
I do.
It's very fulfilling, but it also is a way, it's a different form of advertising that it's not paying the piper the entire time. It still costs money to produce a podcast. Don't think this is, we produce a podcast. No. It's free. No, first of all, it costs time, and you always have to look at that. What is the time it's costing me, and what can I be doing with that time otherwise? Right? There's a opportunity cost involved with everything that you do, and you can't ignore the opportunity cost. But back in the napkin math, it doesn't look at opportunity cost, but it does highlight the big numbers to see if it's worth it. So let's say $1,000 a month on ads. Let's say that I think it's going to cost me $20 to get a lead, which means that there's simply an email subscriber, right? Mm-hmm. I don't think you're getting consults booked at $20 a lead. I think that would be crazy to assume that, but I could be wrong. Mm-hmm. But in this so the way I would approach this exercise is I would say, okay, I'm going to spend $1,000. I'm going to get $20 leads. So I'm going to get 50 leads from that $1,000. Of those 50 leads, I'm going to be able to book a percentage of them into consults. Let's say 10%. Mm-hmm. So I get 5 people from those 50. Sorry. Mm-hmm. 5 people from those 50 that I book into a consult. And let's say that my close rate for consults is normally 50%. But let's say that I want to assume that maybe these are not going to be as easy to close because they came through the internet. Mm-hmm. They're not referrals, right? So maybe I close at 20%. So now I know that my $1,000 spend based on these numbers is going to produce one client. Mm-hmm. So if I figure it's going to cost me $1,000 to get one client, all other costs out of it. Okay, I didn't include a marketing agency to run the Facebook ads for me. I'm not assuming that I'm going to do it myself, right? We made some basic assumptions, but we didn't look at what if scenarios, worst case scenarios, any of that, right? Mm-hmm. Now, how much do I get from a client? Like what is my revenue per client? Mm-hmm. If my revenue per client is 4 times or more that $1,000, this is an idea I'm going to run with. I'm not going to necessarily do it, but it checked that box. I'm going to go to the next thing. Why do I say 4 times or more?
That was my next question, Moshe.
So
great.
It's very simple. Your operating expenses should be tracking, if you're under 500,000 in revenue, somewhere around the 30% range, right? Mm-hmm. Your operating expenses at a larger, if you're at $1 million, should be tracking 40%. Mm-hmm. So your marketing costs can't be 100% of your operating expenses. Mm-hmm. You cannot spend more than 25% of your revenue on marketing, because then all of your operating expenses are going to marketing, meaning you have a bad business model. Mm-hmm. It should probably be 5 times, but 4 times is enough for the back of the napkin math to say, let me investigate this further, because you don't know, what is a marketing agency going to cost me? What am I actually going to spend on ads? How much money am I willing to invest in this to see if it works? There's a lot of other questions that goes into the planning phase of this idea. Mm-hmm. But that's why I think that you have to recognize that my idea is going to be a commitment for a quarter. It's a 90-day commitment that I'm going to try this thing and run with it in my business, or more or less, depending on the size of the idea. But if it's a marketing idea, you got to commit to it long enough to be able to see the success. So it's a quarter of work to get it going. And then it might be a year to see the results, depending on what it is. If it's SEO, if you're investing in somebody to get you, SEO results, you got to commit to 12 months. Otherwise, you're not being fair to you or the provider, because you're not giving them a chance to deliver those results to you. Now, some SEO guys will argue and say, no, I only need 3 months. I only need 6 months. The bottom line is that the content might be good, but if it doesn't get you in the number one spot, it ain't good enough. So you need to have enough time to have enough pieces of content go out and enough opportunity for Google to rank you to start to rank number one for at least some of those keywords. And I didn't want to go into a whole SEO conversation. That's not the point. But the point is that you have to approach this from giving yourself enough time. But that first step of filtering out your idea and putting some numbers behind it is key to determining, do I take the next step, which is, okay, let me investigate how I'm going to get this done. Let me see if my first numbers assumed were right. Because if they were wrong, that could change the whole thing. Let's say that I don't charge $4,000 per client, or I don't collect $4,000 per new client. But let's say that my average revenue per client that comes in is $10,000. And I think I can get a client in for $1,000. It's a no-brainer, right? Let me figure out how to do as much of this as possible. Let's say that I'm a bankruptcy attorney and I only get $1,300 per client, or $1,500, or whatever. Bankruptcy attorneys, don't jump down my throat. I know you're limited on what you could bill. So let's say it's $1,500 per client. You're running a high volume practice. You can't bring in a client for $1,000. It wouldn't work for you. But if we had come up with $100, then that certainly would make sense. That would work for you. And we didn't even talk about the strategy. What is your ad creative? What is the lead magnet? What are you getting people in the door with? How are you getting them to the point where they're booking a consult? But that's not important in the idea selection phase. In the idea selection phase, we need to have big filters. It's kind of like, if you think about what is a filter, right? And that you start off, like, let's say you're playing in the sand. You can have one of these, what are they called? A sieve? Sieve?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So you can have a sieve with big holes, and you can have a sieve with smaller holes, and then you can like hold one over the other. And as you pass the sand through, the top one catches the big rocks and the next one catches the smaller pebbles. And then at the bottom, you have the fine sand, right? So the idea of these filters is they're stacked on each other, so that your first filter is, hey, did I lose excitement? Okay, I got rid of the worst ideas. Now I did my back of the napkin math, and I got rid of the next best worst ideas. The next worst ideas, whatever. You get what I'm trying to say. And then now I'm left with some of the best ideas, but I still need to filter it further. So now let me dive into the planning phase and figure out, is this plan something that still excites me, that I think we have the resources to do it, that I think we have the means to do it. And that there's other filters then, can we afford it from a time or money perspective, which is where you went in your initial analysis. And are our initial assumptions correct? In other words, do I think that we can get $20 conversions? Or I now interviewed 3 marketing agencies who run Facebook ads, and they told me that for my industry and for what I want, I should expect $100 conversions. Well, now I only get 10 leads instead of 50. And if my conversion is still the same on the consult, then I don't have enough clients coming out of it, right? So you have to then go into the minutia of the idea to figure out if it's going to work. And that's where, it's still the ROI conversation, but it's much more detailed. And that's where you went when you're like, oh, well, I have to see, what is it going to cost me as far as staffing and as far as, and those are all things you need to look at, because in the same idea of this Facebook marketing idea that we're discussing, what if you only have capacity to increase 1 client a month? And then after that, you have to hire another attorney. Well, that changes everything.
Yeah, totally.
Right. So you have to look at all of those things. What, is my customer service going to suffer if I suddenly bring in an influx of clients? So if you're in a low ticket, high, if you're fighting traffic tickets, so you're charging $200-300 a client, $400 a client, whatever it is, you got to bring 100 clients through to have a decent business. Mm-hmm. You have to have capacity to serve those 100 people. And if now you're introducing a new idea that's going to bring in 20 more, what if you don't have capacity for 20 more? So now I got to hire more people. What's that going to cost me? So you got to work through these scenarios, but those are in the next filter phase. If you can't get the business model to work on paper, it ain't going to work in real life. And that's if there's one takeaway from this entire conversation for people to hear, it's the intention that is going into the process of deciding whether to move forward with something. Because ultimately, what we tend to do is go straight from idea to implementation. And then we assess afterwards, was it a good idea or not, rather than going through these steps in the middle to figure out beforehand that it's a bad idea. So it ends up costing us in time, money, resources, and our team's rapport, their what's the word I'm looking for?
Morale.
Our team's morale, which you can't put a price tag on that.
No. Yeah, that's for sure. Okay. So I love this because I love talking to someone who values the same things, but their brain works differently. And that is you. I feel like in many ways, there's others too, but you're one of the ones where I feel like I meet my match when I get to talk to you because we both value the same things, but you have a totally different experience set to get somewhere than what I would bring. And so it's almost like I would jump in straight from like idea. What I will adopt more that I haven't been intentionally adopting is the simmering. Just like let it hang and then go from there. If it's sticky enough, it'll stick around. And so I love that. And then from there though, my personality without talking to you would be like, okay, go to the paper and get to the nitty gritty. And if there's things I don't know, like that goes on my list of things to do to figure that stuff out and then come back to this piece of paper where it's almost like I get granular, get the stuff I need, and then stay granular. And what you're saying is, and I see this, there's some value in having this filter that catches the big rocks first and then lets through the good stuff and the finer things. And then same thing with the next filter. So it's almost like I haven't had filters, or that's not how my brain was set up to think about this. It's not these filters that it passes through. It's just like, I would never recommend that someone go for an idea if they are clueless about the ROI from a financial perspective, from an energy perspective, from all of that. But your approach, I really appreciate with the filters. It gives this methodical way of approaching it, and it forces you to not be in a hurry, which is a very good thing. When we're in a hurry, I think we cause ourselves problems.
Right. And that's true with everything. I mean, we have these things that we talk about, like, you should hire slow, fire fast, and when you think about that, why do we have to tell people that? Because the tendency is the opposite, is to hire fast and fire slow.
Right.
And if you think about it, what happens in that dynamic is we woke up one morning and said, oh, I need this. And then by the afternoon, we wanted it accomplished. And we approached it in a rush. And what do you get when you rush into hiring somebody? The same thing you get when you rush into a marriage, right? You get a lousy spouse, you get a lousy employee. So when you go into it slow and you say, I've got all the time in the world to find the right person for me. They've got to check all these boxes, and I'm putting these filters in place, and they've got to match our core values. They've got to they've got to be the right fit for the company. They got to be the right fit for the position I'm putting them into. And I'm going to create these tests and these filters along the way. And I'm going to interview them multiple times. And it seems excessive and nobody does it. But if you do that, you only have to hire somebody once.
Right. That's so true.
And then you keep them.
I actually think there's two things I could see as obstacles that don't need to be obstacles, but obstacles for attorneys listening to this. One is that when they usually are in a hurry. The ones that I work with, they are the ones who are relaxed about their growth grow much more smoothly than the ones who are muscling their way towards growth. Like they're in a hurry to hit the numbers, and they don't pause. They don't take time. They aren't as intentional along the way, I guess is the way to say it, because they're in a hurry. So that's one obstacle that I think it's just a pattern that we get ourselves into. And normally it's not looked as a weakness. It's looked as a strength, like go for it, but there's a lack of intentionality at times when you have that approach. But the other side is, I think that many will be afraid that if they slow down and they actually they like the idea of this and having the filters and these steps, they are afraid, or they know because of how they've handled things before, that it'll fall off because they won't honor that. They won't see it all the way through. And they'll think, well, it's not that the idea wasn't sticky or worth it. It's that I gave up on it too earlier. I just didn't give it the attention. And that just comes down to how they manage themselves and how they manage their priorities. But I could see those as the two things. So I'm curious if anything comes to mind when we say that.
Well, do you want to live your life through FOMO, or do you want to live your life through enjoying the process and reaping the rewards? Like,
exactly.
Yeah. The best example I can use is I also dabble in the stock market. So I have two issues when it comes to my investing in the stock market, right? And they're not the typical ones. I have the patience to wait to buy low and sell high, right? But I have this fear that I'm being too greedy. And therefore I'll exit something before giving it a chance to get to where it needs to go. Right? Now, there's nothing wrong with it. I took a profit, right? But I could have taken so much bigger of a profit, right?
Yeah.
Had I just held on for a few more days. But at the same time, it works the other way around also. Sometimes I'll hold on for a few more days and it turns around and, I lost my opportunity and I got to ride it out for a few more months to see the same return. That, that experience really helps me understand the psyche that that people are experiencing in other things, because a lot of the angst that happens is after I close the trade. And now I have the FOMO of what could have been had I stayed in it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's what you're referring to is when I close the door on an idea and then I keep revisiting it, thinking, what if I had gone down that path? Where would it have taken me? And it's not something that can be solved in a process. Like, that has to be solved at the core. In other words, you have to buy into I'm going to use the word idea. You have to buy into the idea that true success happens from taking intentional action slowly. That is all part of your master plan. And it's not going to happen from reactionary movements to where you perceive the need is going. And I think that really that's how people operate. And if you think about it, look at the example we're talking about, bringing on an employee. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? The only reason you're in a rush to hire an employee is because you have more business than you can handle, right?
There's a pain point.
Right. But I would argue that the fact that you waited so long to bring somebody on has actually cost you a ton of business, because what happens is that psychologically, you're at capacity, and therefore you are turning people away without turning them away. You're not selling them in the sales process because you know you can't handle the work. So instead, you're giving them a poor experience and hoping they'll go away.
Yeah.
And we don't realize we're doing that. But the reality is that if you decide 12 months before, in 12 months, I'm going to have double the amount of revenue. And in order to have double the amount of revenue, I have to have another attorney doing work. And then you purposely hire that attorney because you know that you're getting to that double amount of revenue. Now you've created the situation where that's possible, and it'll come. Like the work will just naturally come to you because you have the capacity for it.
It's so true.
And so you have to buy into this concept of understanding that you need to create the capacity before the need is there, so you could grow into that need. And it's kind of like Parkinson's law, right? And Parkinson's law is usually used the other way around. It's usually used around time. It's used in money and profit first, where your consumption of your need for consumption of a resource is going to expand for the resource available to you. So if you have 40 hours in the work week, you're going to be busy for 40 hours. No matter what you accomplish, you're going to be busy for 40 hours. So if you get your work done in 20, you're still going to work for 40 hours. And if you give yourself 60 hours in the work week, you will be no less productive than you would have been in 40 hours. Because if you force yourself to do everything in 40 hours, you'll get the same amount done. So if you increase on the inverse, if you increase the capacity of the firm, then your consumption of that will increase. So you'll find uses for that attorney's time, or you'll find other uses for your time, which could be better than doing legal work.
Right.
You know, the business owner has way more valuable things to do than the actual technical work that a lawyer does. Yeah. But many of us have a hard time wrapping our heads around that. We have a hard time accepting that when I opened a law firm, it wasn't so I could practice law. Now, if your plan is to stay a solo and that's it, then sure, then that was your plan. But if you wanted to create possibility, if you wanted to create impact, and that was your purpose of opening the doors, then the long-term plan has to be other people doing the work. And if that's the plan, then what are you doing to get there?
Right. 100%. I think, well, for private clients, and we do strategic planning and we're thinking that far ahead, that's one of the things that's factored in is, okay, we're saying this revenue. So then what does that mean we need in terms of people or positions, things like that? That's one of the things we talk about. And one thing I notice for some clients is they have a hard time. They're fearful. They have a hard time believing that revenue is going to be created. That even though like we have a plan on the things that they're going to execute on so that they're on track, it's like I mentioned earlier in the call. It's like dipping their toe into it's almost, they don't go all in on their plan, and so of course the plan's not going to work.
Right.
It feels very similar. Where it's like they're afraid to hire in this scenario that you're talking about. There's a fear of hiring until they need it and they have the revenue. Then they're willing to put the effort in to hire, where they just totally cut themselves off at their knees. And
which is the difference between somebody who takes 2 years to succeed to what they want versus somebody who takes 20 years. And
it's painful. It's not just the time.
Right. Well, yes and no. I mean, so what's happening is that in the trade, the risk trade, right? And trading the risk level to something that I feel more comfortable with, I'm trading how long it takes me to achieve what I really want. And if people recognize that that's what they were doing, I think they would reassess the risk level. In other words, you're not one perceived risk feels very real to you, which is my need to make payroll. The other perceived risk, which is my inability to be a millionaire or whatever your goal is, but I'm just throwing that out there, right? It doesn't feel as real. It's kind of like going to a smoker and saying, you know, in 40 years, you're going to have lung cancer and you're going to suffer greatly, so you should stop smoking. If you try to get somebody to stop smoking that way, you won't be successful, because it's hard for somebody to imagine that future version of themselves. And really what we need you to buy into is the fact that if you are reactionary, it will take longer. Mm-hmm. And if you look at other areas of your life, whenever you react to something, it doesn't get you there faster, it gets you there slower. Mm-hmm. So it's more dangerous, right? The perceived level of risk. Take driving a car, right? If you anticipate the fact that there's a car in front of you 50 feet ahead, and you taper your pace and you bring it down to a little bit slower so you're not coming up on them, you never enter a dangerous situation. If you don't anticipate that and you come flying up on somebody who's going 40 miles an hour and you're doing 70, you find you have to slam on the brakes, your car starts swerving, and you nearly go into a skid because you failed to anticipate what was happening.
Right. That's a perfect word for it, anticipation. But that's what I mean by painful. I don't know what you meant. You said yes and no, but to me, that's pain. That is painful because it pulls you out of your probably.
But the business owner doesn't realize they're experiencing pain, right? I'm hiring somebody now because I have more work than I can handle, and therefore I'm hiring somebody to take that work from me. Yes, I was in pain with all that extra work. I was working 60 hours a week and it was completely unnecessary, but I don't see that. All I see is that I'm uber successful. And I have so many clients that I can't keep up. So it's time for me to bring somebody on, right? It's like a pat on the back instead of a slap on the wrist, right? And as the owner, they feel the pain, but they don't realize that they're in pain, right?
That might be true, but I do think very quickly you get tuned into when you're burning out, because that's what I mean by pain. You're just burning the candle at both ends, and sure, maybe the numbers are good, but your quality of life is kind of suffering on some level. But yeah, I hear you.
There's a story of a man sitting on the on the deck, and there's a dog sitting next to him. The dog is whimpering, and somebody comes up and says, why is your dog whimpering? He says he's in pain. And he says, well, why is he in pain? He said, well, he's sitting on a nail. Well, why doesn't he move? And he said, well, because it's more painful for him to move than it is for him to sit on the nail. And that's really what we're talking about, right? We're talking about where it's more painful, or perceived more painful, for somebody to take the right action than to take the reaction.
That's true. That is, it's just comfortable. It's what you know. Exactly. It's all you know.
Exactly. We all know the mantras of, your success happens in the discomfort zone and stuff like that, right? It's not just cliche on words. Like, people who are really good at coaching and getting people to succeed, they came up with these things because they're true. Because that's where growth happens. Growth happens when you are uncomfortable. And if you're not willing to take risk, and I want to go back, this is going back to when you opened the call, right? And I really wanted to talk about this and I forgot. So I'm going to go back right now. One of the biggest things that holds us back from moving forward with that idea, from going all in, from committing to it, is our risk assessment, right? We're afraid of, what if it doesn't work?
Yes.
You're a freaking law firm owner. You quit a job that was paying you decent money, or most of you did. Some of you started straight out of law school, but you have the opportunity to go work at a law firm and get paid and not have any of these headaches. You took the biggest risk in the world and started a law firm, and you're afraid of, what if this doesn't work?
Right. That's
your fear. Point. Your biggest fear should be, what if I don't succeed as a law firm owner? And that should be overriding all these other fears. That should be the driving factor. If I don't do this, if I don't overcome this little fear, my bigger fear of my law firm not succeeding is going to be the fear that happens. And that should be the overriding fear.
That's so good. Such a good point. I'm actually glad you came back to this, because when you were talking about risk just a moment ago, and, some are more averse to risk than others just by nature. I read a Seth Godin quote that I was like, oh my God, that's so good. He said, I wrote it down. He's talking about anxiety is what he's talking about, like fear and anxiety. And so he said, worry and anxiety is what we feel when we are imagining that it goes wrong. Worry and anxiety is what we feel when we are imagining when it goes wrong. It's not useful. How do you focus that part of your attention on something generous instead? Because anxiety and worry is almost never about someone else. It's about a need for status quo and reassurance. And reassurance is futile because you never have enough of it. I was like, oh my God, it's so good. Reassurance. Yep. That is why people they don't move. They have worry and anxiety because they want assurance that what they're doing is going to work out. And you can do like all the steps the filters you just gave. I mean, that's what you can, that's as good as you can do. And then you got to go and decide and go all in and give yourself the best chance at it succeeding, not dip your toe, not, what's the word? Not meek, but whatever, hesitantly or meekly go forward with it. You really do. If you make the decision, if it passes the filters and you make the decision, your job at that point, your responsibility is to do everything you can to see success for that. And you know what? It might not work out. That's part of the deal.
Yep. And there's two things I want to say to that. The first is you have to recognize you're asking the wrong question. When you say, what if this doesn't work? That's the wrong what if question. The question you should be asking is, what if this does work?
It does work.
Right?
Yes.
And what was the second point I wanted to make? It's escaping me right now. It'll come back at the most inopportune moment, but
that's perfect. That's okay. But yeah, I just really, I love what you've said about how to filter these ideas and let them simmer first. I think that's really wise. That's really wise advice, is to let them simmer. And if they come back to you, then it's probably worth putting through the first filter and the second filter, and then get granular after that. I have one question, and then I have something I want to tie in here because it makes a ton of sense. My first question is, let's say the idea does stick and you start running it through the first filter. How much space do you imagine in your brain, like a range of space or time between running it through the first filter and then running it through like the granular level? Like, is that a few months?
There's no rule of thumb. Everybody's different. So you have to just know you. And it's very easy to figure this one out. Go through one day, and every time you have an idea, write it down. And then just decide, all of these ideas I'm going to sit on. And wait and see how long it takes for you to forget about them. Most likely, it's less than 24 hours.
Yeah.
Okay?
Totally.
Most likely. It could be as long as a week, and it could be that one of them never goes away, but the bulk of them, when do they go away? That's the minimum threshold that you have to wait. The other thing I'm going to tell you is that it really also depends on the excitement level. Like sometimes I'll get an idea and I'll get so excited about it that I'm going to skip to step 2.
Yeah, totally.
And I'm just going to do that math to see, hey, is this a viable idea? But then I'll go back to step 1, right? So I'll just add another filter real quick because maybe the idea is not as good as I thought it was.
Yeah.
And that makes perfect sense. Discount it and get rid of it, right? But if it's still a good idea and I'm like so excited about it, then I'm just going to wait and see. Does it keep me up at night? Do I keep going back to it? Do I keep thinking about it? Has it been something that's consuming me all freaking week? And then I know I'm onto something.
Yeah.
It's those it's those ideas that, I mean, why do you do what you do, right? Is it to just go through the motions of, I'm a business owner, I'm going to pay payroll, I'm going to do this, No, there's stuff you like doing, and you should be spending all of your time doing the stuff you love, and everything else should be outsourced to somebody else. Now, that's not so realistic when you're early on in your business. You got to go through the muck, you got to deal with it. But as you get some level of success, you should be handing that stuff off so that you are excited to do what you do every single day. And that's why this filter is so powerful, because when you're excited about something, there's a reason for it. You don't have to psychoanalyze yourself and try to figure out why. It's exciting you for some reason. Something about it is exciting to you, and therefore you should probably run with it. But you want to make sure that that's real, true excitement, which is why we wait.
Right. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Well, okay. So This came to me as you were talking, sort of in the middle of this episode, but I am taking part in your conference that you have in February. And one of the things that I'm really pumped about is that I feel pretty honored that you have pulled together some top-notch professionals to help law firm owners in their own verticals and their own aspects. And I am super privileged and honored that I'm a part of that group. The one thing that crosses my mind is that, I think everyone listening to this podcast should be going. It doesn't make sense not to attend this. There isn't another space where all these people are pulled together in a way that you can learn from in one setting, carve out time, attend, grow, like be intentional with this, because this is once a year. I know there's other conferences out there, but not like this one, which is why I feel so proud to be taking part in it. But this topic about determining your ROI on an idea, I think is relevant because those who do attend the conference are going to be having all these crazy, amazing ideas because all these really great speakers are going to be providing ideas. And, it's going to be important for them to prioritize and use some sort of filter so that they don't just start throwing things against the wall out of excitement and not being very thoughtful and very intentional and choosing and constraining down to like, okay, these ideas go first. And I've done the filtering process that we talked about here. I don't know if you have anything you want to say about that, but it hit me in the middle that this is actually the perfect topic to talk about with you, because I'll be with you again in February, where there's a million ideas that law firm owners are going to have taking part in this. And so this is kind of important.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you, there's a few things that I want to mention. First of all, we very intentionally set this up in a way that it's not that you're attending a bunch of sessions and listening to somebody talk and you're done. Mm-hmm. There are definitely some sessions like that. Our keynote sessions are going to be speakers talking. You're just going to listen and be enthralled by what they have to say, and you're going to take notes and you're going to try to implement some of that stuff. Mm-hmm. We have main stage sessions where also it's going to be that way. But the bulk of the event starts with a panel discussion on a topic with 6 experts. And then it's going to go to breakout sessions where each of those 6 people is leading a breakout session. Those breakout sessions are hands-on workshops. Mm-hmm. And the reason we did that is so that you're not leaving with these ideas that you need to now simmer on and try to figure out what you're going to implement and hopefully get to 1 or 2 of them. But it's rather you're choosing which you already know or think is the most important one for you. You're going to that one and you're actually doing the work. You're leaving with something that you can implement immediately in your firm. And that is exactly why we set it up this way, because the feedback we got from our audience is we're tired of sitting on Zoom calls for 3 days at these events and leaving with a to-do list a mile long that I'm never going to get to.
Totally.
So you definitely could use the filter process that we gave you in this last 45 minutes or hour, however long we've been going. But on top of that, you should be doing the filtering beforehand, selecting where you're going to spend your time in the event, which sessions are you going to go to, and which ones are the most important to you. And then you're already getting that process started. It's not like you're starting afterwards. So that's one thing that I think is going to help people and help them understand what this event really is and how we're setting it up. Another thing is I already anticipated this when we created the sales funnel for this event, right? So you buy a ticket, and there's a few things that happen in the purchase process when you buy a ticket. The first thing is that you have an option to purchase a super summary. So what I'm going to do is after the event, I am recording a 3-minute summary of every single session.
Awesome.
And in 2 hours, you're going to have a recap of the entire 3 days. And for $37 extra, you can get that in the purchase process. So that's, if you're worried about FOMO, if you're just you don't think you're going to be able to sit through all of the content because there's a lot, and now you're live at the event, you can't possibly sit through all the content because we have 30 breakouts that are running 6 at a time. So there's 5 sections or five periods of time where you're going to miss 80% of what we're delivering. So there's a VIP level ticket that you can buy all the recordings, so you could go and watch that. But if you don't think you're going to have time to watch that all, still get the VIPs. You can attend the ones that really are important to you if you can't make them all. But that super summary is going to be really helpful. The other thing is that right after you buy, the next thing I do is I upsell you. I pitch another thing. And that other thing that I pitch is I'm doing a workshop after the event to help you create a plan based on what you learned at the event. So that workshop is literally going to take you through a process where we're going to help you figure out what is my plan for the next 12 months based on all of this new information that I have and all these new ideas that came up.
Brilliant.
So we've got you covered. It's already
I
there.
love that.
It's gonna cost you $500, but as long as you know going into it that's this is really, really valuable, it's a no-brainer to join me for that.
Yeah. No, that it really is a no-brainer at that price point. All my listeners, all my peeps, you should buy a ticket through my link, because Moshe and I are going to team up for everyone that buys through my link. And we're going to offer, this will be like a couple weeks after the seminar or after the summit, we're going to offer a tax planning workshop for law firm owners. So there'll be more about that, which, I mean, come on, who doesn't need that? That's fantastic.
Right. And before your eyes glaze over, let me just tell you, you might not realize it, but tax, especially once you start really making money, it's going to eat up about 50% of your take-home pay. So you work all year long and you're like, yes, I'm killing it. I made $250,000. I made $500,000. And then 125 or 250,000 of that goes to the government. Now, what if we can make that 20% instead of 50%? Right. Or what if we can make it 30% instead of 50%? Or what if we could just save you $20,000 or $30,000? How much value would that have?
Right.
Well,
that's a great.
Well, at least whet your appetite on that workshop.
So that's so funny because you're so right, because about putting the numbers, the actual value for the workshop. In my head, I'm just thinking peace of freaking mind. I would like, that would be amazing for, there's a lot of law firm owners that just let their accountants handle things, that just let their peeps handle things, and they don't really know or understand or have someone that's working with them on strategy. And that just feels like an important piece that's probably missing for a chunk of law firm owners. So yeah,
real quick, there's a difference between tax planning and tax prep.
Right.
Most people go to an accountant for tax preparation. 95% of the population, maybe even 95% of business owners, their relationship with their accountant is January to April.
Yeah.
And tax planning is January to December.
Yeah.
Of the previous year, right?
Yes.
So they're two totally different animals, and you probably don't have a relationship right now for that. And let me at least enlighten you in that workshop to show you the power of paying attention to that.
Would you go so far as to say, because I think I know the answer, but let's just check because you're the accountant, that if you have a tax prep relationship with your accountant, but not a tax planning relationship with your accountant or an ongoing relationship, then there's probably room for improvements to be made or a better strategy to be implemented.
Oh, absolutely. Because when you go for tax prep, there's nothing they could do to change what happened the year before.
Yeah, exactly.
So all of the strategies you could have done to reduce your taxes are gone. The only thing you're paying them for is to think a little bit more than a software application. To try to find something that you already did that's going to help you.
Yeah, try to find. That's exactly right. So great. Well, I'll put the link in the show notes to register for the event. It's lawfirmgrowthsummit.com/velocitywork. That sounds like a mouthful, but it's easy. lawfirmgrowthsummit.com/velocitywork. Just our two companies. Yeah, it's going to be great. And the link will be in the show notes. Links to you will be in the show notes, all that jazz.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for coming on. It's fun to just meet your mind.
Thank you so much for having me, and I appreciate you putting me in front of your folks. It's been a great conversation, and I'm happy to continue it.
Cool.
We can talk again as many times as you want.
All right. Perfect. Let's do it again.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks. Hey there. If you enjoyed this podcast, I highly recommend you come and check out Mastery Group. It is where owner attorneys come together to study this material, apply it, and thus create really big results for their firm and for their life. So come on over, velocitywork.com/join to get more information and get started. Show notes from this episode can be found at velocitywork.com/podcast.